So it's been a long time since we have had class, and in the past we have covered two topics related to flowers, right? One was, or just one. Did we do one or two?
Two.
Two.
Two. First time
So
we did the lotus, and the next time was the first time was sketch, and the next time was like
watercolor,
first was pencil, and yeah, second time was water.
right? So today we'll expand on the watercolor a little bit and do. I want to introduce you to fine painting with watercolor. So this can come in handy when you want to create very realistic looking images. The technique can be
Okay.
used for anything from flowers to landscape to portraiture. It's a combination of understanding consistency of paint, the kind of glazing and layering that you can do, how to manipulate the brush. Last time we learned which brush to choose. So this time we are going to just expand on all these things. And each of these segments can be expanded and practiced in more and more detail. So florals are one of the easiest topic or uh, least difficult, I would say, to practice this. And mastering the technique uh, is like a multi-pronged approach. While on the one hand, you need to understand how color works. On the other hand, you need to develop a certain strength in drawing and painting. And I could equate it to almost like a gymnastic ability, the kind of flexibility you need of the hand to work on paper. So over time, I have realized that this is just like doing ab exercises in a gym. You are able to do much more when you have a strong core, and this exercise is going to start helping you build that strong core. In time, many of these factors become almost second nature. When you pick up a brush, you know exactly how much water it has, how much pigment, and whether you need to dab the color off it or take more color, add more water, reduce water. All of that starts becoming a flow of just action without having to think about it. But today I want to introduce you to all the factors that you need to pay mind to so that you don't have too long a period of trial and error. Um, Today, especially, you'll have to be a little patient with yourself. And anything you goof up on is going to be like a mark for you that you need to remember and make a note of. Um, like, I suppose this is how you would perform experiments in a lab, that you take two, three things, you have a certain idea in your mind what the end result should be, but you don't know how to get to it. So at every point you just make an observation. And I hate or I hesitate to use the word mistake because we have such a negative connotation attached to mistake that we tend to dismiss it or want to forget it. At least in this, in art, you should absolutely not forget your mistakes. Having made mistakes is a good thing. It's one step further. Not knowing where you would make the mistakes is even worse. So at least you will have gone beyond that. So I have shared some images last week. We are going to illustrate those. Let me share the images and I can speak to you about them. These flowers, I think, are cosmos. I have selected them for their regular petal structure. Fairly easy to draw. It's almost the the same kind of petal distributed quite evenly, 8 petals on the axis of, I guess, what are these called? Cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. So that's easy to construct. Once the construction is done, then we can focus on rendering it. Then we have daisies, which have a slightly more complicated structure. But here the flower is white, so we don't have color as much as form and shadow work. And then the last one, which is a favorite with a lot of people, but also causes a lot of trepidation, that's roses. So let's see which ones we can do. We will first tackle the cosmos. Then we will do a small sample of the daisies, and then we will go on to the roses. So I'm distributing about 20 minutes for each flower. We could reduce the time for the daisies to about 10 minutes and then give some more time to the rose. So I want you to just actually draw the whole clump. And when you're drawing this, the first thing to do is to start off with the same kind of basic shape that we have always done before. First, place proportionate circles in a certain position, so you know where your flower is going to be. Then, according to whatever center you have marked, you will mark the center of the flower. It may not always be at the center of the outer circle. And once you have marked this, then you start making the petals. I'm going to make a screenshot of this and share it with you, so it'll guide you to make the drawing. Right. We are going to make the flowers about this size, all 4 of them together. Then we will make the couple of the daisies over here on the top and the rose over here. So on one page, you have all the flowers. But if you feel the need to make notes, leave a little bit of margin at the bottom of each of these illustrations. For the rose, you can leave on the right so that you can make quick notes of regarding color or regarding consistency or a thought that you might have. So let's start off with the circle for the flower on top. Look at the size and proportion of the flower on the left and keep an eye on the overlap. This fish shape overlap should be a nice indicator of accuracy. And then here, the circles do not overlap, but it touches the circle on the left. And look at how far the circle goes to the right. So even balancing out these basic shapes is good practice for you to figure out your proportions. Then try to see where the center circle is with respect to all the other lines you have made. And it may not even be a circle. It may just be an oval, like in this case, a flattened oval. Once this is done, you can reduce some of the lines so that you just see a basic outline of the circle, but it's not too obtrusive, doesn't interfere with the drawing of the petals. So the rough lines you make should just be barely visible to you. Even if you move 10 centimeters away, if you don't see the line, that's a good thing. Very often people get a little extra enthusiastic about this sketching and make the lines so dark that then you have to bother about erasing all of them. So I know my petal has to come till here, and I just start a construction of first the sides of the petals. Sometimes there's an overlap. The overlap may be visible, sometimes it may not be visible. And pay attention to this continuity of line. Now, when you're drawing this, whenever you're drawing anything, the rules remain the same. Keep your reference image on this in the same plane as you're drawing, so that you're not looking up and down and up and down all the time. If you are looking up, then hold your book like this so that you can keep checking on proportions. The petal that I'm drawing now is foreshortened. It looks shorter, and that's because it is coming towards us a little bit. So don't try to reason out with what you see and correct.
I think what I realized is my mistake when with all the flowers I've been drawing, that foreshortening I have missed. And that's why they tend to look a bit like all the front petals are the ones which I have.
So what is happening over there? Can you tell me?
I think I'm making them as long as the top.
Ah, okay.
So
So
that's
that
why
is
the angle doesn't look, it doesn't look like a 3D thing. It looks flat. It
right.
doesn't flat angle.
The reason that is happening is that you're probably sketching with your brain rather than your eyes. I think I might have explained this before. So whatever images we see, our brain is perpetually analyzing those images and giving us data. When we are when we try to analyze that data and reproduce it, we are actively engaging with that data. So we are actively interpreting it into something that is tangible. In this case, we are interpreting this data into lines. But because we are actively engaging with the data, we are sometimes, I guess, vulnerable to I guess, interpreting the data in the wrong circumstances. Now, for example, when you see these flowers, we are, for those of us who know flowers, would know what flower it is. And maybe you might have some kind of association with it that comes to mind. But apart from that, of course, if you're doing botany, you might have some more data about it, but hardly anything more than that. But when you are illustrating, you are not really aware, before illustration, you're not really aware about foreshortening or about objects coming towards you. You know they are, but you are not really seeing that. So interpreting that is very difficult unless you start illustrating. The true interpretation of any object is to observe it in its objectivity. I know it's too much of obs over here. Objective, and this goes for all kinds of data. Sometimes have either of you solved these lateral thinking puzzles where you're given a set of data and you will go through it and try to figure out why something happens the way it happens. Like there's this famous riddle about a man and his son meet with an accident, and they go to a hospital and the doctor says, I can't operate on the boy because he's my son. And when you ask how this is possible, everyone starts thinking maybe it's a gay couple, maybe he is the adopted father or something like that. But the answer to this puzzle is that the doctor is a woman. And this is, it's an embedded gender bias that we often have. We aren't even aware of it. I wasn't even aware of it till I faced this. So objectively speaking, if you were to analyze the situation, father, son meet with an accident, they go to a doctor, doctor says, I can't because the boy is my son, equals doctor is the mother. This is objective analysis. But we start overthinking this. Because we are clouded with all our biases become a filter through which we receive all this information, and then we interpret it for ourselves in different ways. So this is all subjective. Likewise, when we see a picture, when we start analyzing it actively, when we have to draw it, we start thinking this petal is coming towards me, so I need to draw it so that it looks like it's coming towards me. All you have to do is draw it the way you see it. And when you look at it clearly, you notice that the angles of the sides of the petals are different. The size of the petal itself is different, and the way it is oriented is probably different. A shadow might be slightly more sharp, and that's about it. Equal to looks like it is facing me, because after all, this is just an illusion of something that's coming towards me, because it's not really coming towards me. It is on a flat surface. So we need to break that down. And all you need to do is remove all these preconceived filters and just look at the line and ask it, where are you headed? Are you headed east way or west? Are you headed towards 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock? So on and so forth. These are objective questions. How far do you go? How far do you go with respect to the line above you, below you, or to the right or left of you? And before you know it, you start getting the shape. And your brain is still fighting and saying, no, this doesn't look right, this doesn't look right. But you have to, in time, tell your brain that your services are done. We don't need them right now. Now let the eyes
like in this flower, the one to the extreme right. That one has this one petal where you can see just a white, like a cloud, like a long thing. So that's very weird. Like the brain is
yeah.
no,
Don't think about it. Just draw it. Now, when you come to the center of the flower also, though we have made circles, erase those circles and make lines like fences. Over here as well, I'm making these lines pointing up and down. Even these lines themselves can be quite telling. And if there's a spot where you can't see anything, like the sides of a petal, don't draw them. Don't create your own data set. Now, when you're drawing the stalks, try to visualize the stalk coming from the back of the center of one flower, and then draw a line going behind these flowers to underlap the line. But think of continuity. Here, I don't know where this stalk is coming from, but I'm going to assign it this stalk, and this fellow is somewhere over here. That should be good. Now I'm going to show you two ways of painting these flowers, but both are going to eventually end up as a very fine detailed flower. We'll paint this one and this one. And I would like you to first just observe what I'm doing. Layer by layer, you can then join me. So the first layer is going to be the center. I want you to use a number 10 brush, but don't load the brush too much. Loading the brush too much means taking so much water that if you were to hold the brush upright, you can see that it bubbles up at the tip. So you just need a little bit. You can either drain the brush on your water container, then take some paint. In this case, we are using gamboge. You will need extra water to extract paint from the cake. And then squeeze out some of the paint. And then apply it in the center in this fashion, coming towards the center. So even the strokes that you make can be thoughtful. This color we can put on all flowers. Oh, I'm going to remove this. Now to make notes again, I'm going to show you how you can make beautiful notes also. Please avoid writing scribbles all around your page. Every act can be either making the picture beautiful or just so-so. We need to let these colors dry. So you can start writing the names of colors and start documenting that at the bottom. We will document the colors here, and in a block here, if you want to write what brush we used or whatever techniques we did, you can write them later. So thinking about layout right in the beginning is also good. That's why I'm telling you how my plan is going to be. That way you know where to leave space, and all our pages should look more or less the same. So this is gamboge. The color distinction between the center of the flower and the petals is quite sharp. So you don't really need to blend at this stage. So we can keep these two colors completely separate. And we use gamboge first because obviously it's a lighter color. You don't want it to be muddied by the next color that we'll use. Now, for the next painting, I'm going to start off with painting the petals on top. I'm going to use two consistencies of crimson. One is this very watery consistency, so that I just stain the paper. As this dries, you'll notice this is a very light color. So this is crimson. And this also is crimson, but here the concentration of color is higher. So the first crimson, I'm just using the tip of my brush and taking just so much paint out. We can potentially paint this entire flower with just so much paint because we are making a very light wash of it. When I dip the brush in water as well, this is what I do. It's just the tip. I just go down, touch water, and bring it up. My test for myself is to have water that is as clear as possible so that I'm not wasting too much paint. And that comes from the fact that my parents wouldn't buy me art material willy-nilly. So I had to keep saving all my paint. I had to really deserve it. All right. Now, here one process is to tread very carefully and paint one petal at a time. So I'm going to use this light color. It is slightly watery, you can see, and pull the color towards the center. And when I'm pulling, I'm also putting a little bit of pressure. Little bit, not too much. Now there's too much paint here, so I'm dabbing my brush and pulling the color further down towards the center, removing excess paint by dabbing against this and reducing, dabbing, reducing. But I want a little bit of moisture over here, just a little bit. You can either dab it or you can wait till the color dries. And then I'm going to take a concentrated color. See, this is not the same as my wash. This is concentrated. And with the same motion, I'm going to introduce it into the center of the petal, towards the center. I'm lifting the brush towards the center because that is where, as I lift the brush, there's a blob that gets left behind. And I get this very nice illusion of color. Okay, do you want to give it a shot? When you're painting subsequent petals, paint alternate petals. And you will be able to sense how much is enough paint as you paint each petal. So the experiment here will be observation of consistency and also volume of paint in your brush. Which petal you manage to take the exact amount and consistency and volume in your brush to be able to manage a smooth, seamless application in which you had to increase or decrease paint. And don't worry too much. This is just layer one. So if you'll end up getting a patch, it's not the end of the world. We can always go over this. Okay, how's it looking? Just don't fiddle with it too much. Don't try to fix anything. If you have puddles, if the color is running all over the place, whatever is happening, just let it happen and just observe. You should be done by now. If you're not done, then you're probably overworking the petals.
And with alternate ones, not all.
Sorry, what?
No, I just finished the alternate ones, not all of them.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. All right. No, carry on, but just make sure that you're not going over and over and over the petals. Let's see. Majbin is showing us. All right. That's the brush you're using, Majbin? Okay, when you are applying, when you're applying the paint, just make sure that your brush rolls to a tip. This is not bad. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay. Yeah. All right. No, this is going fine. Now, while this flower dries, we will paint the next flower. Hopefully, the petals on the left will have dried. For the next flower, we are going to paint all the petals in this light shade in one go. And here, direction won't matter. It just has to be a flat pink color throughout. It will, of course, help if you pull the color to the center. And you get something like this. Obviously, all the other color pet flowers, we can paint with the same technique because they don't have too many color variations. So you might as well just go ahead and do that. Pull the color towards the center. So even if there's a little bit of color variation, it remains true to the structure of the flower. And when doing this, you should freely rotate the book. Okay. Now, if you use the right consistency of paint, your flowers will dry very quickly. So the first flower we've done should be dried. Now here, I'm going to show you the detailing. Now I'm switching to a very thin brush. You can use a 0 number or a 00 or a 1 number brush, something that can give you a very thin line and very little paint will be used over there. I'm just going to use the same shade over here. Look at how light this shade is. And I'm going to start sculpting the dark patches by overlaying them with brush strokes. So in some cases, you have a medium light color coming all the way from the tips to the center. And then you have a slightly deeper shade. So I'm making a separate shade over here, but it's all very dry. So there isn't too much water in this. And that allows me to make darker shades and also very firm lines. So in this case also, we're using two different color shades. One which is very watery but dry, one which is dark but dry. And start building the internal texture. And you'll notice that I am also pressing my brush in a few places so that I get this very nice manipulated stroke. And I can do this in all the petals first as layer 1. As you're pulling the brush down, in some places you will press and then pull down straight into the center. And in some places you would just use the tip of the brush to make a thin line like this. So press and pull down. The pressing also helps to distribute the paint a little unevenly, which works to our advantage because then you don't have to paint in that shape. So this technique allows you to slowly build layers. This is, in a sense, it's like driving with training wheels throughout. Not driving, I mean riding. Because this allows you complete control over the end result. And we use the same technique that we did in the first flower. We keep pulling the color back into the center and keep increasing the intensity of the color so that it starts resembling the reference image. So right now I'm at about 50% of what I should have, so that I know I can make an even deeper shade. And this layering will help keep my colors vibrant as I'm doing this exercise, and also help me create dimension. So when I make these lines, I'm creating an illusion of the furling of the petals, how it opens up and where it might be slightly thicker, where it might be slightly thinner. In some places, you can reduce the color and also press the brush and go slightly deeper. Over here, it's slightly deeper. Create appropriate textures. But keep looking at the flower, because there's a good chance that you get so engrossed in just making this texture that you end up making it completely even, and then that starts looking unnatural. So over here also I can see that there's a little tiny shadow just on the outer end coming inward. So I'm pressing the brush down and creating those shadows. And then keep building that richness. This can be a very meditative exercise. Yeah. Now we can do the exact same thing in the first flower as well. Now, all these clouds are in the first layer, but if I were to add the dramatic lines towards the center, all that will be reduced. So I can do it this way. I can start fat and then go outward in a very thin line. Whatever line you can control best. Or come inward and press.
No.
Here as well, you can add some lines to the main part of the flower in a very light color to add texture and depth. And then we can attack the center. Now in the center, you can make a few colors like a yellow ochre, just in dots, and then put some dots on the outside. Remember that we are not trying to replicate what we see in nature. That's not the intention of watercolor. So don't try to compete with nature and say, I'm going to make a flower exactly like that. We are merely attempting to recreate the illusion of a flower because it serves a certain purpose for us. So just replicate the colors in the kind of abstract shape that you see there. So I use yellow ochre there, and now I'm using a burnt umber in a few places to for it to resemble like the stalks of some of the pollen in only a few places. And I'm going to use some of that burnt umber also in the center to add depth of color as an overlayer. So you won't see it as burnt umber. You'd probably just see it as a deeper crimson. Okay, how are we doing so far? In the first flower also, you can take a very light shade and make these shapes in the petals by just making some brush strokes in. Like you start off with a thin line and then press it down so that you get a thick stroke towards the end. And you need to be careful about the direction of these lines because these are the lines that will give you the shape and the 3D effect. They should not be at an angle that is unnatural and alien as compared to the lines that you've made in the center. They should seem like a continuation. So this is what requires those, or not requires, this is what will give you the ab exercises. Being able to predict how much paint, what shade, where to press. And after you press, what kind of line or shape you get. And then this one thing that you also will have to learn is to take advantage of whatever shape you land up making, even if it is not what you expected. Not let that derail your illustration. Now here also I'm adding a little bit of burnt umber and in the same kind of light consistency and shade so that I don't make a patch there. It's a very dry paint. I can see more of that dark shade towards the bottom. So I'm just going to make it over there. And that too will add to the illusion of shadow. So during this entire exercise, at no point do we need to vigorously wash our brush in water because you don't want that much water playing on your brush at all. It's just dipping the tip of your brush into the water and then quickly out again. And now just to complete the illustration, I'm going to put a very light sap green color on the stalks as well. Here too, I am just putting a light green first and then using the same shade or the same color. You can add a little bit of yellow ochre or not lemon really, but yellow ochre should be fine. and then run a line across any one side and underneath some petals. That second line is very important. That gives depth. Okay, our timing has gone completely for a toss. So I don't want to rush you. We have another 25 minutes and we don't have to do both flowers. If you want to just continue and complete this one flower, that's fine as well. If you want to move to any one of the other flowers, we can move to that as well.
We do one or two daisies. Those have nice shadow.
Yeah. All right. So let me, while you are completing this, I will just edit the daisies and daisy picture and I will put it up so you can, we can just make that patch then up here. Okay, I've shared the picture. It's in a small rectangular shape. So I'm using the same technique to make the drawing. And this time now, there are some places where I'm going to fudge up some details because I don't see all the lines clearly. Like over here, I'm going to make that one petal shape that I see. And then another petal I see over here, but I don't know what's happening here. And I'm going to leave part of it as fill in the blanks. Now I can see all these properly. Now in this case also, focus on getting the shape as accurately as you can. Here, at this point, I have two petals, and the distinction between the two petals is not visible, so I won't bother drawing that. Over here, all sorts of mess is happening, so I'm not going to bother that. And too many things happening here, but I can't really tell. So I'm just leaving that. I'm omitting the flower over here because I'm going to just paint around it. And now I can draw the border as well, and then I'm going to draw the flower here. Okay. So now in this case, for the daisies, if you have tape, paper tape, you can use that to make the edges. Hopefully this is all at right angles. I'll erase some of the border lines. I don't really need them, but of course it's going to be a dark color around. Now comes the tricky bit. For daisies, the colors are fairly simple. You have a combination of gamboge and yellow ochre in the center. So you have a light gamboge and then a higher or thicker intensity of gamboge, but it's still the same color. And then according to the shadow, you will have a yellow ochre as well. So we can paint the whole thing in yellow first. Gamboge. Then establishing source of light becomes very important for this flower. So I'm going to put a mix of gamboge and yellow ochre along this edge. And even when painting it, around the edge, I will make a few strokes like this. So I instantly get texture in just one go. Some texture on the right as well. On sorry, on the left. Same thing over here. So these first few brush strokes can be just brush manipulation, but you need to also acknowledge that there is a texture, so you don't really make it too flat. All the colors also are transparent, translucent. So you can go over them, like over here, I can go over this with more concentrated gamboge, and I could also add a little bit of orange or scarlet to that to change the color and make it more dramatic. So all these overlays make a good story, I guess, illusion. Now the color we have around the flowers is probably we can make a light blue. It's actually a gray shade, the shadows. So you can take a thin brush here and you can create a generic or a bluish gray shade using black and cobalt blue. Simply because I don't like to use a very deep gray color. And using this color, again in a very lightish shade, we paint around the petals. So we will paint next to or behind this petal. Paint some shadows inside this petal. And everything is painted with this brush manipulated stroke. So it's almost as if we are recreating our pencil lines with paint. And then we can take this exact light shade of the same color and paint all these blocks behind the flower in this shade. That's the only way we can make it look like it's three-dimensional. And we also have to paint shapes into petals like this. So here again, that exercise of not thinking comes into play. just faithfully copy the color. And even in this case, you can keep adding depth by increasing the shadow or the dark gray towards the edge that is closest to the shadow. Like now over here, I will put 2 layers of color, and I can actually just make an outline and then color it in because it's such a sharp shadow that it'll look good that way. And then the same gray can also be used to increase the intensity of uh, or add, in fact, shadows to the center of the flower as well. Ashita, are you trying this?
I'm just at the pencil
Okay,
drawing it.
okay, no problem.
But it is very complicated because of the shadows.
Don't look at them as shadows, just look at them as light patches
Color.
and dark patches. Yeah. I don't know whether I've told you this in class, but about this painting by Rene Magritte called the something of illusion. 1 second, let me look for the image. The treachery of images.
No, I don't think.
Okay, so I'm going to share screen and show you what that image is. You must have come across this painting. So this says this is not a pipe. And it's meant to confuse and also to question. So one says, okay, what is this? Is this a, if it's not a pipe, I can see this only as a pipe, then what could this be? So it's meant to say that this is not a pipe, but this is an image of a pipe. And of course, a lot of people who do not like or understand modern art would instantly poo-poo it, saying, "Isme kaun si badi baat hai? Even I can paint this pipe." But it is meant to question and also to debate. And also, it's great for beginners to understand that when you're making a picture, you are not making the thing itself. You are merely creating an image or, in fact, an illusion using certain tools to convince other people and sometimes even yourself that what you see is not actually what it is, but what it represents. So the juxtaposition of lines and color, shadow, so on and so forth, is meant to delight you in the illusion of an object that you know of. You get what I mean? It's a very long connection that we're trying to make. But in that, it helps you to understand that there is a difference between an image of the thing and the thing itself. So, as far as beginners are concerned, we are so trapped by the thing that it is a flower, it must look like a flower, that we forget that there are certain things that we are not creating. We are not actually creating petals. We are creating a shape that is going to remind us of petals. And this discussion can go so far because then you can say, if I draw an object and if I've never seen it before, like somebody draws a certain fruit from a region that you've never visited and you've never seen that fruit before, you can still recognize it when you encounter it. How does that happen? So
I think
it's
like with hoarding painters, it's very like they just paint from when you see it first, it just looks like patches, patches, patches. It is, and then when it just connects up, you see the whole image, and probably the person who paints it actually doesn't even know what
yeah,
the whole thing
yeah, it's
is
very
supposed
possible.
to be.
So we
Because
also need to maintain that kind of objectivity when we are drawing. And so I since I'm self-trained and I was never taught this, I only realized this after a number of years when my drawing had improved remarkably. And it was a puzzle for people around me as well, and definitely my parents and um, my siblings and everyone. How do you draw this? And very often you assume that it is the skill of the hand. That's what I assumed as well. But it's not just that. It has a lot to do with what you see and how you interpret what you see. So if you
And
interpret it wrong, you will paint it wrong. If you
yeah, if you
interpret
have
it correctly,
science interfering with you here, it's very difficult.
yeah, it is. And I wouldn't beat myself up about this also. The brain is trained for years, not just years, from the beginning of evolution. It has been trained to do only this with itself. Its only task is to help give you data that is going to help preserve you yourself. So it is doing the job that it's designed for. But somewhere along the way, we decide that no, you know what, now I also want to draw stuff. And I want to create my own stuff and I want to assign some meaning to it and then I want to enjoy it. And now, brain, you sit back and don't interfere. So it's really unfair that such a fine-tuned instrument is now being told that your job is done. Now sit back and let me take charge. So respectfully, I would say the brain needs to just be told to relax, and then what you come up with, I think, is uh, more charitable. Now, once you've drawn all of this, to bring this out further, you can make a very deep green color using sap green and cobalt blue and maybe even a little bit of black. This is a very unusual shade.
Mm.
Actually, before black, you can also try a little bit of burnt umber to make a dark shade. And use that color to paint in the negative space. And even when you're painting that, in some places, you paint it a little greener. Some places, you then suddenly introduce a little bit of burnt umber. So this will start looking like a more believable background, like a clump of leaves and shadows of leaves in, I guess, a meadow of these
Daisy.
daisies. Plus, we need that for our daisies to shine. Otherwise, there's no contrast. We can't make the shadows any deeper than they are. And also, it's like a supporting story. The background will support the illusion of the petals that we are making. Chalo, our time is up now, Ashwita.
Yeah, thank you.
Do
I will
you have
continue to do
any
this with the- Yeah.
queries?
No, I will try it with the recording and
Okay,
I will finish it off. I will try to at least.
all right.
Yeah, I
Do
think
you have
so from
any
here this
questions?
distance it's so beautiful. Like I can see all the gray looking like the light and it's too good.
It's not difficult at all. Well, if you
Okay.
get the right shade, that's all that matters. And if you want to be careful, just make the shade a little
Lighter.
lighter than usual. Most people uh, think that they need more paint than they actually need. And layering must be introduced, or you must become more and more comfortable with layering.
Yeah. I think even here now, I think I can see all the lines. I think that's still the issue that's there.
Yeah.
It's still,
So,
yeah.
correct. So this is the ab exercises that I was
Yeah.
talking about. You just look at a few things over here. Every time you're painting, check if you're holding your breath, because sometimes when you're holding your breath, the pressure that you put on the pen or the brush is uneven. You often start with very light pressure and you hold your breath, and then when you're drawing the line, you can't control the pressure. So just learn to relax. Make one line on a rough sheet first. Just keep it handy. And while exhaling, just make a line that is smooth. So make a line that, if you can imagine, the tip of the brush is at the end of a pendulum, and the pendulum swings like this, right? So imagine if the brush is going to make a line while the pendulum swings, it gently comes close to the paper, makes contact, becomes wide, and then it becomes thin again and goes up. So that is the nature of the line that we need to make. That, in fact, is the nature of line we should make even when drawing with pencil. Pen is a completely different matter. We can do the same with pen, but if you can make your hand work this way, you are able to control the line much better. It's much lighter. In eventually, whatever medium you use, your line will become that. That is the ab exercise control. I don't know what would be the muscle equivalent to abs in a
Ab-
hand.
No,
It's
I can feel the
over.
pressure here. Yeah. And I think I'm like, I'm sitting and doing that. So I need to just
Yeah,
breathe
yeah.
and
But you could
get
be
that.
restricting your breathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So check that. Okay,
Okay.
chalo.
Thank you.
So potentially I'll see you again next week. Let's see
Yeah.
who else can join. Otherwise, we will continue. Next week we are starting with animals.
Megbeen is a very quiet participant. So.
Yeah, yeah. But now I'm gonna again announce on the group that we are starting with animals from next week. So hopefully some new people might join in.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. Chalo.
Thank
See you. Bye.
you.